Kind of hope there's nothing too weird about this stuff here. Okay, so excesses should be excesses of secular justification and inconsistencies harmful Islam. How to correctly argue? Modern Muslims should argue in three ways, but to varying degrees. And there is such a massive imbalance between these three ways. Oh my god, I think this is way too loud, isn't it? Let me just lower this. Okay, I think this should be fine. Okay, I hope this is the sweet spot. If it's too loud, I'm gonna crack. Okay, these three ways that lead one in the long term having undesirable qualities, such as persistently trying to argue that Islam can be aligned with secular beliefs. The person only feels that a ruling of Islam is a justice when it agrees or can be aligned with secular beliefs. When the ruling, even if the person accepts it as justice, feels internally, I think this is when the ruling, even if the person accepts it as justice, feels internally doubt, disturbance, difficulty in accepting the rule, or whenever the rule is brought up, they feel this strain, doubt, difficulty, and use weakish, forced arguments that again try to make the rule appear to agree with secularism. And such a person feels that what is rational, this is a vague word, so let's clarify it, what is the correct way to think, is secularism, even if they do not internally admit it to themselves nor state it, but they're entirely comfortable and feel no resistance or disturbance to secular beliefs and their rulings and foundational beliefs, through which all secular rulings spring from. When it comes to any beliefs not in line with those foundational beliefs of secularism, or some of the secular beliefs, what do I mean by that? Let me be very clear. So when it comes to Islamic rulings and truths that Allah has revealed about how justice is, every time it contradicts a secular belief and is not clearly alignable with it, the person feels doubt to some degree, disturbance, and uses weakish arguments in an attempt to show that secularism agrees with Islamic rulings. All of that, in the long term, for a great majority of Muslims, is maintaining their secular kufri instincts rather than removing and replacing it entirely. To be fair, let me be fair. People who do this tend to still be less secular than Muslims. Than the Muslims who never even hear this and tend to just completely have secular beliefs entirely. So this crowd of Muslims who do this, which are the majority on the online, da'wah scene, the popular da'wah guys you already know, and their audiences, majority of them do this. This is the excessive they excessively utilize this type of argumentation. They are less secular in a way because they're more aligned with more Islamic rulings like apostasy law, blasphemy law, jihad being offensive, concubinage, slavery. But they simultaneously are still holding on to some degree to secular beliefs. They're still indirectly, without maybe realizing it, almost treating secularism in a sort of non-judgmental way, or they're kind of giving this place to secularistic beliefs that they shouldn't be giving. They're giving this sort of untouchability to it because they should just be outright rejecting it, all of it. And so there's a great harm in overusing this form of arguing. I'm being very clear here, overusing. It's not that you can never use it. It's that when you make it the predominant tool, then people basically reduce their ability to make stronger arguments out of, honestly, fear of judgment, because what's the norm, whether in the online dawah scene or offline, is to constantly try to justify Islamic rulings under secular beliefs, which is a problem because now you have pretty much made it such that whoever argues outside that circle of arguments is seen as extremely strange and off and whatnot. There's a great harm in overusing this form of arguing, and this form of arguing comes in two ways. Either one is trying to show that secularism's own beliefs can lead to either an identical ruling that Islam already has, or a similar one to what Islam has. And that this ruling's reason is either identical to Islam's, similar, or drastically different, though when it is different, it is not often mentioned. Why is that important? It's very funny because what happens sometimes is basically a ruling about the way something is. So I'll give you an example. Imagine somebody, right, tries to justify the forbiddance and injustice of homosexual relationships by arguing that because it predominantly leads, or a great portion of homosexuals who do this, they tend to have diseases, problems with going to the toilet and whatnot. That's why it's haram or evil. And this is completely false. It's not that these aren't additional evil factors that can affect some of the homosexuals, but that it completely, like this type of way of focusing on it is actually hiding the universal reason that applies to every homosexual, whether or not he got harmed by his sodomization or not. Which is what? That the very act of homosexual relations is itself evil. The very act, that act is in, like, due to what it is. That is why it is judged as evil. That is why it is forbidden by Allah. Not because of harm. Not that harm can't be an additional evil reason. But it's not necessary for it to be there in order to declare homosexual relationships as evil. That's a very important point. So, for example, if I was to think about it, like, imagine somebody said, actually, I'm gonna. So I don't think an example is needed. We'll just leave it there. So there is a great harm of using this form of argument, and this form of arguing comes in two ways. Either one is trying to show that secularists' own beliefs can lead to it, and blah, 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 blah. So why am I saying this? Because, okay, people don't mention it. Again, they are making themselves conform to secularism to some degree, while not trying to just reject that foundational assumption and belief of secularism, which is what? For so long as you don't cause harm and consent, what you do is good. That's a mythology. It's not true. It's imaginary as the beliefs of Nazis, or the beliefs of communists, or the beliefs of racists, the beliefs of Zionists. It's a mythology. It's a fabricated, mythological, unprovable, imaginary assumption. That's how we should be treating it, but we don't. We often try to constantly justify Islam in a way that attempts to make Islam aligned with secularism. Or the other form of arguing is to show that the way secularists is to show that. So wait, okay, so this is basically the other way Muslims predominantly try arguing against secularists. The other form of arguing is to show that secularists do not believe every ruling entailed by their beliefs, and so there's a sort of contradiction where belief A of a secularist leads to two other beliefs which do not contradict it, such as the permissibility of homosexual relations for so long as it doesn't cause harm, and the permissibility of incestual relations for so long as is done without harm. The belief that is used to declare those two beliefs correct is the belief that for so long as one causes no harm and the parties involved permit each other to do those acts, what one is doing is good. Now, if one accepts homosexual relations being good due to this belief, we just mentioned that by that same belief, if that truly is how justice is, they should also allow incestual relationships, as there is no counter or contradictory moral belief that restricts it just to homosexual relationships in liberalism/secularism. For a person to choose one, for a person to choose one, even though what he believes are the moral facts, I think this should be reset. This is too. Even though what he believes leads to justifying another belief, this shows that he does not trust what belief A entails. And this leads to a contradiction where he trusts belief A when it leads to permitting belief, I don't know, B. But he does not trust belief A when it leads to belief B. Sorry, does that make sense? Oh, sorry, belief C. So in this case, He trusts that for so long as you cause no harm and consent, what you do is good. But he trusts this for homosexual relationships, but not for incestual ones. Why? Well, he has no counter. He has no other moral beliefs that specify prohibiting incest. Yet he still declares it's evil. Okay, whatever. Let's just go on. This shows a contradiction, or I'll just try to correct. This shows a contradiction in that they accept what the belief entails for one belief, but not for another belief that has equal reason, equal justification, the exact same facts supporting its permissibility. Now, what is the problem with these two types of argumentation? I guess I should say. They're like salt on food. Using them too much backfires. Using them a little in relation to other arguments, which instead should be dominating our dialogues, is how we should argue. Why do I say that? Well, when all you do is either attempt to show Islam is aligned with secularism, which figures like Ali Dawah, Muhammad Ajab, and Dan Haqiqat do, or you show that secularism entails something like incest being permitted, and yet secularists do not accept that, and all you do is stop there, how are you going to clearly and clarifyingly remove secular instincts and beliefs out of Muslims entirely? The type of Muslim produced from excessive exposure from this sorts of arguments is a Muslim whose innate feeling of certainty in Islam depends on whether Islam is aligned with one or more foundational secular beliefs. So to be fair to Daniel, Muhammad Ajab, and Ali Dawah, it's not that they do not increase the Islamicness of a person and decrease the secularization of it, but they always try to align the argument with either one or more central or foundational secular beliefs, rather than just outright rejecting and negating secular beliefs and just justifying Islam on its own self, which I think I kind of already hinted at before. It's a constant detriment of restricting reasons for why a ruling is the way it is to what secularists think is a valid reason for a ruling, rather than the reasons Allah actually revealed it for, is a discontentment / lack of satisfaction at the actual reasons behind rulings, and only feeling satisfied / content when those rulings are argued or justified using secular reasons. People pleasing is another harm, ironically. Even when one argues for unpopular or rejected positions, they are still inside this people-pleasing bubble because they keep straining their minds and intentions that they must argue secularly. They also speak in extreme vagueness and lack of clarity when it comes to using words like objective or subjective morality, as well as other terms that do not in a clear way clarify what it means for secular morality to be false. They also never clarify to secularists that secularism was a fabricated, mythological, unproven, imaginary idea. And it's not just zero proof, and it has not just, and it's not just, I think that's what I said, and it's not just that it has zero proof for its beliefs, but it also has already been disproven due to the proofs and revelations of Islam, which describes justice as it actually is. These secularized arguing Muslims remind me Allah Greekifies Ash'ari Muslims, or the whole family of them, whom basically adopted the beliefs of the Greeks about how to argue about God and anything else, and would play this similar game where every argument had to be in line with some false belief of the Greeks for it to be rational. I hate this vague word. When asked for what it meant by it, the person just means correctly thinking. So now the ridiculousness is so clear that to correctly think is that I have to argue in line with a false mythological idea of the Greeks or Westerners. The detriments I've listed, I personally experienced for many years and watched the majority of the lay Muslims and even the very influencers argue this way go through. This discontentment, almost a sense of insufficiency or irrationality of the true reasons behind Islamic rulings. And to be rational, which when asked what does that even mean, is just to correctly argue, is somehow supposedly they must argue in alignment with a false belief or multiple false beliefs of secularists. This is not a good long-term approach. Its detriments are not something good, and can lead to people leaving Islam. Because if anything, the YouTuber who argues this way is indirectly saying the only correct way to argue about moral issues is to be in alignment with one or more secular beliefs, and if one does not do that, they are making a ridiculous argument. Let's use this argument. Yet this idea for so long, yes, the idea that for so long as you cause no harm and you consent, both are of age. What the hell did I write here? Let's use this argument. Yes, the idea for so long as you cause no harm and consent, what you do is good. Good. And for so long, both are of age as well. Of age, then this leads to forbidding homosexual relations, incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and even relations with things like trees and so on. Though there's a better way of using this argument to actually hint at the true reason for why homosexual relations is evil. If I ask a person that despite those other abnormal sexualities being done in a manner that is without harm and is consensual, you still inwardly feel that those are evil regardless of their lack of harm and consensuality. This is also the case with homosexual relations. You do not feel this disgust for homosexual relations not because it is natural to feel fine and nothing towards homosexuals, but because you were raised and ridded of this instinct when very young through movies, TV shows, anime, entertainment, teachers, parents, schools, forefathers. These natural emotions got erased through constant acceptance of LGBTQ being morally good. In addition to that, secular beliefs already permitted, and that was in fact the main reason or fact for why LGBTQ types even walk around saying and expressing what they believe and do. But all of this is abnormal. Those secular beliefs that lead to allowing incest are the same ones that lead to allowing homosexual relations. That indicates its abnormality because a human, say in a jungle without even needing to be taught, will naturally recognize homosexuality like incest to be an abnormality of how romantic and sexual relations should be. An injustice due to what they are, not due to harm. So this goes back to the main issue with that belief. For so long as one causes no harm and consents, what one does is good. This belief is a fabricated, mythological, unproven, imaginary guess about how justice is. In fact, it has been disproven, meaning it's been proven that this is a false belief about justice. Justice is not this way at all. There's not just no proof. Really think about this. There's not just no proof of that, but there's proof against that, and that disproves disproves it. The fact is that Allah revealed the Quran and Sunnah with many proofs, indicating it is from Allah, the one who knows everything, including justice. And He described how justice actually is in the Quran and the Sunnah. We also know from the majoritorian of mankind that it appears naturally and universally that humans reject homosexuality, incest, bestiality, necrophilia together, rather than separating between them. Of course, there will be exceptions, and so this is a lesser proof than the Quran and Sunnah, but it still indicates something about this secular belief that for so long as one causes no harm and consents, that this belief is entirely abnormal, false, wrong, immoral, inaccurate. Now, if you feel disturbed by what I said, I ask you, how do you know that your disturbance is reliable? How do you know that your certainty in that secular belief is reliable? How do you know that you feeling fine with that secular belief is truly how you should feel? You live in a world where a lot of history has passed and present. A lot of history past and present have many groups disagreeing drastically in what they feel is obviously moral and what each feels is fine to believe. Take Zionists, racists, Nazis, ISIS. Their moral beliefs are drastically different from yours, and the beliefs about morality that they feel fine with, you find disturbing, and the beliefs of morality that they find disturbing, you find fine, and the beliefs you hold about morality, you feel certainty in, while they feel no certainty at all in those beliefs. Rather, they feel entirely doubtful and uncertain about such beliefs, and the beliefs they feel certainty in, you feel no certainty in. What you find obviously moral and what they find obviously moral contradict each other. What you think is correct arguing and correct thinking clashes with what they think is correct arguing and correct thinking. And in fact, they all clash with each other, not just you. And if your moral beliefs are false, then it's entirely imaginable that their moral beliefs are correct. And if their moral beliefs are false, then it's entirely imaginable that yours are correct. Now, how do we settle these disagreements about how justice is between mankind? Well, the best way is find out if the one who definitely knows it, such as the All-Knower, has revealed a scripture or message about it. And are there any proofs to indicate that he has? If there is, then we believe in that description of how justice is, as it disproves all other ideas of how justice is, that we believe that in that description of justice is, and as it disproves all other ideas of how justice is and proves what it actually is.